You're listening to a New York Islanders episode of the Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the team's latest goings-on as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at @RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Islanders fans! Welcome to the last team-specific episode of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. It's certainly bittersweet to be doing this. I loved going in depth on my favorite teams. In case you haven't heard, this week will be the last week of the Jacob Valk Show. I'm moving on to bigger and better things. As I said, all good things must come to an end. But look, nothing has changed with the Islanders. They're still a really bad team. I understand that they shut out the Ducks last night. Good win, very impressive win. I was watching it, but come on. They're 17 points out of a playoff spot with 5 games in hand on the Capitals. It's not happening. The playoff dream is dead. I'll repeat what I've said previously. Trade Clutterbuck. Trade Parise. Trade everyone who's a pending UFA. And you can even trade Bailey, Beauvillier, and Varlamov if you want to. So that makes what I'm about to say kind of counterintuitive, because I'm going to go in depth on something that's been mentioned on Islanders Twitter for a while. The possibility of them trading for Filip Forsberg. And we've heard for a while that Forsberg could be available. He's a pending UFA. Obviously, he's going to get a ton of money. The Predators aren't in a bad position with the salary cap. According to CapFriendly.com, their projected cap space for next year is just under $25 million. So they can re-sign Forsberg very easily. But Forsberg may decide that he wants to leave the Preds. I mean, look, the Predators in Forsberg's tenure haven't been great. They've only made it out of the second round once. That was in 16-17. They haven't made it out of the first round since 17-18. This year, it looks like they're gonna make the playoffs. It's not a guarantee, but it looks like they will. The thing is, though, season ends today, they're going up against the Flames in the first round. Do you really see the Predators beating the Flames in a 7-game series? I don't. I mean, David Poile has a choice to make. He can either hope that Forsberg resigns with the Predators, or he runs the risk of him pulling a John Tavares. A superstar player leaving the only team that he's ever known. Now, the Islanders have been mentioned for a couple reasons. A, Forsberg does have a little bit of a connection to the Islanders. Barry Trotz was his first coach. I don't know what the relationship was like between Forsberg and Trotz. I'll say this, it wasn't until Peter Laviolette got to the Predators that Forsberg got regular playing time and became the player that we've all come to know and love. But also, Forsberg fits the Islanders perfectly. He's 27, so he's in the prime of his career. You think about a first line of Anders Lee, Matthew Barzal, and Filip Forsberg. That is lethal. And you think about a second line that could be comprised of Kiefer Bellows, Brock Nelson, and Oliver Wahlstrom. That's a top six that you can be really excited about. There are some other holes, but one thing that the Islanders have needed for an incredibly long time is offense. What's one thing that Filip Forsberg brings? Offense. He's leading the Predators in goals with 27. He's a point-a-game player this year. 45 points in 40 games. He's a little injury-prone. He hasn't played 70 games since the 16-17 season. But you know what? I think you can take the good with the bad. Filip Forsberg would be a perfect New York Islander. If the Islanders were to bring in Forsberg on a long-term basis, every Islanders fan on earth would be doing backflips. The thing is, though, there is a big question mark. If the Islanders are going to trade for Forsberg, will it be as a rental? Or will it be another J.G. Pageau situation? Where the Islanders trade for him, and then, like, the second after, he signs a long-term extension. And also, what would the Islanders need to give up to get Forsberg? You're talking about a king's ransom. The Islanders traded a first, a second, and a third to get Pageau. They traded a first, a fourth, AJ Greer, and Mason Jobst to get Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac. The thing is, though, Forsberg is at another level than those guys. We're looking at a Jack Eichel type trade. Like, the Predators would probably want a first, a roster player, a top prospect, and more for Forsberg. Do you do that if you're Lamoriello? I mean, the crux of the trade is probably Forsberg for a first, Anthony Beauvillier, and maybe a guy like Atu Roddy. That's a lot to give up, but for a guy like Forsberg, you've got to give to get. Again, we're not talking about some schmagegi here. We're talking about Filip Forsberg. Someone who's going to score 30 goals this year. Someone who may push 40. We're talking about a really, really, really good player. Now, you may be thinking, Jacob, It makes no sense to give all that up if the Islanders can just sign him in free agency. The New York Islanders have a terrible history of luring free agents here. Okay? I don't care about UBS Arena and the allure of a permanent home and, it's state-of-the-art, it's a great place to watch a hockey game. I get all that. Tell me one free agent who has ever signed with the New York Islanders that wasn't already here. The biggest guys are probably Mikhail Grabovski and Nikolai Kulemin. Anders Lee, re-signed. Kyle Palmieri, re-signed. John Tavares, left in free agency. Artemi Panarin chose the Rangers over the Islanders. The New York Islanders are not a premier free agent destination. They've never been a premier free agent destination. What makes you think that players are going to want to join now when they're out of the playoffs? It makes no sense. Use your noodle. The idea behind trading for Forsberg is you get him locked up now. I agree 100% that it makes no sense to trade for Forsberg as a rental. No question. But it makes a ton of sense to trade for Forsberg and then the minute he's an Islander, sign him to a big extension. The Islanders will have the cap flexibility to do that. They're just under $14 million under the cap, according to capfriendly.com. And that number can go up if they trade Bailey and Varlamov. If you want to take the chance on Forsberg reaching free agency and choosing the Islanders, that's fine. I fully understand the logic of not trading big pieces this year. But if you really want to make this just a down year, a million things went against them, the long road trip, the COVID outbreak, the reschedulings, injuries, stuff like that, you've got to add talent. And you've got to add talent in their prime. Enough with the older players, enough with guys like Parise and Green and Chara, these over-the-hill schmageggies. Bring in players that are in their prime. So if you want to trade for Forsberg, someone who in 5 months or so will be one of, if not the best free agent on the market, and make it so you don't need to go into a bidding war with other teams. Trade for him now and sign him to a big contract. It does make sense. It also makes sense for the Islanders to not do that, sell off everything they can, and wait until free agency actually hits. Maybe they can trade for Forsberg's rights at the NHL draft. They've done that before. Think about what the Islanders could be next year. Lee, Barzal, Forsberg, Bellows, Nelson, Wahlstrom, either Max Domi or Travis Boyd, preferably Domi, but I'd be fine with Boyd. J.G. Pageau and Kyle Palmieri, and Matt Martin, Casey Cizikas, and either Cal Clutterbuck or Ross Johnston. If you trade Clutterbuck, you're not going to sign him in free agency probably, so Put Johnston in on the fourth line. You have him signed long-term anyway. I'm fine with that. And on defense, Pelech, Polak, Dobson, Mayfield, and let's say John Merrill and either Sebastian Aho or Robin Salo, with Sorokin as the goalie. And I'll bring in some Schmagegi as the backup. Whatever, backup goalies are interchangeable. Out of all those outside players, the biggest one is Forsberg. You can live without Domi. You can live without Merrill. Can you live without Filip Forsberg? Probably not. It does make sense for the Islanders to be aggressive, trade for Forsberg, and lock him up long term. It also makes sense for them to wait and see how free agency unfolds. The one thing that doesn't make sense is for the Islanders to make a playoff push for this year, because this season is over. It's all about next year. In the next month, Lou Lamoriello needs to do everything possible to set the Islanders up for success for next year. Forget about this year. You'll get regular episodes of The Jacob Valk Show this Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Until then, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.